So we're live. So we spoke last week, and I
Yeah.
must have had half a dozen people that said, "Oh, you've got to speak to him again." So when you spoke to me about what you did with Derek Acorah and Jack the
Yeah.
Ripper and all this kind of thing, I thought I'd love to have a chat with you. So if anyone's watching this, I'm going to put all the links for John G. Sutton's Tales from the Jails account. So, John, obviously you've told me a little bit about your prison years, working, guarding the prisoners. But how did you get involved with Derek Acorah, who, for those who don't know, is like a spiritual person? Where did that all start from?
Well, it started when I was working really with PJ Proby. PJ Proby was a 1960s pop star, and in 1990 he asked me to work with him and try and resurrect his career. And as I got on television working with Proby, to my house started to come psychic mediums. And one man came to me and he said, I've been sent by the spirit world to tell you that it's time for you to start work. Now, I had an out-of-body experience, a near-death experience, in which I'd been in another dimension, and the spirits had said to me, if we send you back, because I was nearly dead, if we send you back, you're on a mission, and you'll have to work for spirit. And they said, but be aware that when you go back, it will be extremely difficult for you, because you'll be physically handicapped. And when I woke up in my body, I was amputated. They'd amputated my right leg because I got gangrene. And I did get better, and I did start working for spirit when this spiritual medium came to see me, and we started working together. So I took him from nowhere because I knew how to do it. And we got on things like the James Whale show, and we did the big features in the newspapers. We toured all the number one theatre circuits. We had radio shows, and we even did the London Palladium. And I wrote his book. It was called The Psychic World of James Byrne. It was published by HarperCollins. So I became quite a bit of a name working for the spiritualist movement. And I was offered the position of feature editor of their Journal of Spiritualism, which I wrote for 27 years, by the way.
Right.
And whilst I was doing this, a man came to me called Derek Acorah and asked me to manage him. Well, I was extremely busy at the time, so I just said, listen, I can't do this. I'm too busy, sorry. So for 2 years, I didn't touch it. But then he came back to see me again, and he said, listen, the spirits are saying you've got to work with me. So I said, well, let's talk about it, because I'd just finished one association.
So John, I'm right in saying Derek's spirit was a guy called called Sam. Is that right?
Well, not when he first came to me, it wasn't. I think he made it all up, to be perfectly honest. But
Right.
he came to see me, and I said, okay, we'll do it. I said, but how much television have you done? And he hadn't done any. And I said, well, all right, how much radio have you done? He hadn't done any. So he'd done no radio, no television. All he'd been doing was working in the back streets of Liverpool, doing private consultations at, I don't know, £15 a time. So I said, okay, well, come with me. I'll show you how it's done. So I took him with me to a radio studio in Preston called Red Rose Radio. And at the time, I had a comedy show, and I called myself, believe this or not, it was just a joke. I called myself Professor Dr. Daddy Magumba. And seriously, yeah, I mean, I know it sounds mad. But so I said to Derek, come and watch me do this. So he said, okay, we'll do. So me and Derek Acorah went to the radio studio. I said, just sit there and watch it. So the radio host, I knew the radio host and I knew the managing director of the station. So we were talking away like you and I are talking away now. And I think it was about 10:05. He said, "Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to introduce you to tonight's guest, Professor Dr. Daddy Magumba." And I stopped speaking like this and started, I mean, I know it's not politically correct now, but it was 30 years ago, goodness me. And I started talking in a very strange kind of, "Oh, this I'm the old daddy, you know. We got the rumble and the bumble and the telling you the Bermuda cards," you know, stupid stuff like that, you know. And the people absolutely loved it. And they were ringing in to speak to Daddy Magumba, which was me. And Acorah was laughing so much he fell on the floor. So I said, when I finished, I did an hour, you know, as Daddy Magumba. And when we'd finished, I said, "That's how you do it. You know, you've got to entertain people." So from there, I started to put him out to the theatres. And I was writing a book at the time for Penguin Books in America called "Do You Believe in Ghosts?" And I had to go to America to interview a man called Larry Montz, who was the director of a movement called the International Society for Paranormal Research in Hollywood. And I spoke to Larry Montz. I said, "What about doing a show while I'm over there?" He said, "Okay, we'll book a theatre." So they booked a theatre. It was called the Vogue Theatre on Hollywood Boulevard. So I said, "Put Derek Acorah's name up there and we'll do the show." So it came, I think it was January 1999. We flew out to Los Angeles, and Larry Montz and his team met us at the airport and took us, and off we went. We did a few ghost busts together. We did the Comedy Club on Sunset Strip, which used to be a gangsters nightclub called Ciro's. And they all used to hang out there, you know, Frank Sinatra and all the mob. And we did a ghost bust of the house that used to belong to Dean Martin. And we did a show together on Hollywood Boulevard at the Vogue Theatre. And I was speaking to Larry Montz, and I said, "Well, why don't you come to England and make a film?" Because he had access to all the big names in Hollywood. So why don't you come to England and we'll do a film in London, you know? So he said, "That's a great idea." He said, "Just let me look at the funding." He said, "And I'll get back to you." So we came back to England, and I really didn't think too much about it. And then there was a film on television about a haunted museum in the Midlands, and it showed footage of what looked like ghosts. And Montz got on the internet to me and said, "Can you get that footage?" So I contacted, I think it was Nottingham Council or somewhere, and they agreed to provide me with the footage. So Montz saw this and he said, "Right, I'm coming over." So he came over, and I scripted a series of investigations for Larry Montz and the International Society for Paranormal Research to include Derek Acorah, because the idea was.
Can I just ask you, John? So how long did you have this working relationship with Derek Acorah?
Well, I was with him for about 2 years, really. And right. I also got a publishing contract to write his book, The Psychic World of Derek Acorah.
So you actually wrote that?
I wrote that, yeah. It was at one time, believe it or not, the #1 best-selling book on Amazon. It sold hundreds of thousands of copies.
Right.
And so we made this film together, and one part of the film was a research into the ghosts of Jack the Ripper. And we went to London.
So that was in 1999, wasn't it?
That was 1999, yeah, around about April.
You went inside the 10 Bells. So, I mean, obviously that's from a personal interest, John. Yeah. That was my personal interest. And can you just tell me how your full experiences were with all that? Because the pub's 300 years old now. I spoke to Lindsay Sibbett the other day, fantastic ripperologist. She said all the money in the world, she would never stay in there ever again because she was physically attacked by a ghost. How did you find it all?
Well, we weren't attacked by ghosts, I can tell you that. The really, the darkest element of it was on Mitre Square, where the murder took place of Catherine Eddowes, yeah? That was one of the Ripper's victims. And there, both Acorah and myself and the members of the Society for Paranormal Research, we experienced, it was like a really cold wind that was like circulating around us like a mini tornado, but it wasn't a tornado. It was just like a spiritual feeling that it was really cold and dark and unpleasant. And that was right at the edge of Mitre Square. I believe they built up something around it then, because we're going back 20 odd years. But that was the spookiest part of it. We also had a guide there who was a former police officer who'd been the caretaker of the Black Museum at Scotland Yard.
Was that Donald Rumbelow?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So Donald Rumbelow was in on it.
Yeah.
And do you know that wind, that bad experience? Do you think that could have been Jack the Ripper or Catherine Eddowes?
It could have been either of them. We didn't get to, it didn't remain that long. But there's a film out there. You can get this on Amazon. It's called The Ghosts of England, the International Society for Paranormal Research. It was released as a DVD and it was released as a film in America. It won an award, actually. We did a number of haunted houses and various investigations with the ISPR. And of course, we did the haunted museum in Nottingham, just outside Nottingham, which was quite spooky. And at the same time, we were doing TV shows, and BBC Radio 4 came along. And so one way or another, I was building up his career. And at the same time, his book was coming out. But the problem was the Americans got the idea that the star of the show was Derek Acorah, and I was just the writer, you see. So they approached Derek Acorah with a view to him joining the ISPR. And I said, yeah, well, that's all right, but we need contracts. So when I saw the contracts were all wrong. I said, we cannot sign these. What they're promising is 10% of the profits. But experience tells me that there is no profit. So we need a fixed sum, or we need 10% of the gross, yeah? Not 10% of the profits, because experience tells me that there never is any profits.
Yeah. So,
well, that's the way they work it anyway. So I said to Derek Acorah, listen, I'm your manager. I had him under contract. And I said, if you sign this, I said, we can't go any further. He said, well, I have got to sign it. I've got to think about my career. I said, well, I'll tell you what, see this contract. And I just ripped it up in front of him. I said, now piss off and never speak to me again. And that was the last time I ever spoke to Derek Acorah.
All right, okay. So obviously that was, I mean, Derek passed a couple of years ago. I take it you never spoke. I mean, how did you find him? Was he as gifted, or was, you know, Sally Morgan, there was this big exposure a couple of years back. Was Derek involved in anything like that, or was he, how would you describe him, John? Because obviously you were around him. What's your personal experiences on his ability?
Well, I put him on at the Liverpool Empire, which is one of the big theatres on the #1 theatre circuit. And we had about 1,300 people in. And he did readings, but only for the front 2 rows. And the reason for that was that he claimed to be a psychic medium. But the difference is, when you're a psychic, you can pick up energy, you can pick up vibrations, but only over a certain distance. If you're a medium, it doesn't matter. You pick it up, you know, anywhere. You could do it over the telephone. You could, it doesn't matter. But you can do it all around the theatre. But Derek Acorah couldn't do that. So all he was doing was working on the front 2 or 3 rows. And then he only gave 5 messages in the entire show. I said to him, you can't do a show like this. You've got to actually get right round the audience and entertain everybody, not just the first 5 rows. So we had a bit of a disagreement about that. The idea that he had a guide called Sam. Well, he never had a guide called Sam when I was working with him. He invented that. A bit like a sooty puppet, you know. Mm. It was just an invention of his. As for him being psychic, I mean, if you've seen some of the videos on YouTube, you can see that he's obviously having a laugh. I mean, what he was basically doing was reproducing my idea of Daddy Magumba and taking it to the television. You know,
you know, with Derek Acorah, it's alleged he wasn't a kind of. I mean, I've read a lot of stories, particularly in the last couple of days, but it's alleged that he wasn't a somewhat darker. Is there anything that you ever come across that, John?
Yeah, I did actually. I asked him what his real name was. Johnson, Derek Johnson. So I said to him, where do you get this name from, Acorah? And he said, oh, it was from my grandfather who was Dutch. So I did some research, and his grandfather wasn't Dutch. His grandfather wasn't a sailor. His grandfather worked on a market in Birkenhead or something like that, because he was a Scouser, you know. Mm. But there is the Valley of Acorah, yeah, which is a place of absolute darkness and despair, and it's written about in the Bible, the Valley of Acorah. Now, I believe that Derek Acorah was involved in some kind of mysticism or dark rituals that involved him taking another name. In other words, to be baptized in the name of whatever demon he was working with. And therefore he would be called Acorah or Acorah, from the darkness, from the desert. You don't take my word for it, look it up. The Valley of Acorah.
You know, I have looked into a little bit, and I've read on the forums, and it's always alleged, and obviously you were around him for a couple of years. Obviously, you know, you said he was talented.
He was an entertainer. He was an entertainer, but as for working for spiritualism, he never went to a spiritualist church. He might have been to one, but he certainly was not a spiritualist. To be a spiritualist medium, you become a class B medium or something with the National Society of Spiritualists. He wasn't in any way involved in that. So that was a basic lie. And the fact that he was going on television inventing these communications when he tried to communicate with the spirit of Michael Jackson by holding his hat and all the rest of that nonsense was an actual insult to spiritualism. And I wrote about that in the Spiritualist Journal, of which I was the feature editor.
Yeah. So for anyone clued up a little bit on the spiritual world, was that easy to see? Hang on a minute, he's pulling our leg here.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't have to be too smart, and you wouldn't have to be a spiritualist to see that. I mean, anybody who'd go on television claiming that they were communicating with, the ghost of some highwayman, and then start spouting Mary loves Dick, Mary loves Dick. Or when they fed him, seriously, he did that. And when
I've seen it, I watched it today.
And when they fed him information, they fed him information at, there was a jail in Cornwall, and he was told that one of the jailers who'd worked there was a cruel South African called Keir Starfer or something, yeah? Anyway, Derek Acorah went in there and he managed to channel the spirit of this so-called South African jailer, yeah? Except it was an anagram of Derek Faker.
Really?
It was an anagram of Derek Faker. Another one he did, they told him this pub was haunted by a man called Rick Edels. And it was just a fictitious name. And Rick Eadles was an anagram of Derek Lies. So he fell for it hook, line, and sinker. And really,
regarding Jack the Ripper, I mean, I take it you were in the White Hart and you were in the 10 Bells. You've spoken about Mitre Square, which you got something pretty unpleasant. Was there any other specific things around regarding Jack the Ripper that you felt, John, or do you think the whole exercise was like a waste of time?
Well, the problem was that the people from America had done their research, and they had a number of mediums with them. A man called Peter James from America, who was famous in America. He did about 50 or 60 episodes of a series called Sightings, in which they went to things like Alcatraz and the boat that was the Queen Elizabeth, and they did all the big stuff in America, and they'd fed them a script. So I felt that the Americans were speaking from a script. And as for Derek Acorah, well, he didn't pick anything up that I saw. That was right. What he did was he listened to what they were saying and then rehashed it.
Right. So regarding, I mean, obviously you've, in your past career, you've come across a lot of, how can I say, not particularly very nice people. So when they come across the spirit world, they probably don't get any nicer. Have any of these spirits ever tried to come in contact with you, John?
Absolutely, yeah. They do that. See, the thing is about the spirit world, it's misunderstood. And it's misunderstood because I believe that religion, to a certain extent, misleads people. You know, the only way to heaven is through this certain pathway. You know, if you don't believe in Muhammad, or you don't believe in Buddha, you don't believe in Jesus, you don't believe in Muhammad, you are not going to the heavenly place. But I have been there. I've been nearly dead twice. And on both occasions, religion was never mentioned. What they say to you is, tell us about your life and what you have actually done. And the thing is, I absolutely believe as you sow, so shall you reap. So if you've been a really wicked bastard in this world, that's what you're going to associate with when you get into the next dimension. And if you've been a perfectly ordinary guy, perhaps like you and me, then that's who you're going to meet. You're not going to mix with people who are in the stoking the fires of hell, unless you've actually behaved in such a manner to warrant that direction. And the spirits that I've met who've come back have accepted their direction. In other words, when they step out of their physical bodies, they do not take the pathway into their allocated place, because they know that if they do that, then they're going into the fires of hell or wherever.
John, when we're talking about the fires of hell, I spoke to Paul Sykes' only sibling about 7 years ago, and she's been and got spirit readings and all that, and Paul come through, and she said to the spirits, I mean, she was getting a lot of bad things, insults, and she said, "Is he in hell?" And the spirit guy said, "Well, his ass is certainly burning." And what's your opinion on the afterlife? Where do we go? Obviously, you're a man who has great knowledge and experience in kind of these certain subjects. What's your opinion to people watching this? What happens when we go?
Well, it's a cultural thing, yeah? It's cultural. Well, I've spoken to spirits who have spoken to me and say that they caught a train, yeah? That when they passed, they went to a train station and they caught a train. And when they got off the train, waiting for them at the station was all the family. And that's what happens. With me, they tried to persuade me to get on a plane. And I wouldn't go on the plane because I'd seen the angels, you know, and they'd told me to come back. So I came back. but I could have got on the plane. Everybody else that was sat around me, all people I didn't know, they went and got on the plane. And then when you get off the plane, waiting for you is your idea of heaven, because it's a place of thought. You're not physically alive, but you are spiritually alive.
I mean, obviously, John, your channel's picking up now. It's getting a lot of people are talking about it, and you're getting known. Have you experienced a lot of the trolls yet?
Yeah, I had a bit of an issue this last couple of days. People saying, somebody posted up saying, are there no such things as the Official Secrets Act? Because, what you're talking about these people, you shouldn't be speaking about them. But I don't mention by name anybody who is physically alive, unless they've given me their permission to do so. I mean, today I mentioned a man called Ronnie Pickering because I had asked Ronnie Pickering's permission, and he said, "Yeah, go for it." So I did mention Ronnie Pickering, but I wrote for The Guardian some time ago, and at the end of it, I said, what I am writing here is, according to the authorities, an offence against the Official Secrets Act. And what I want to say, because I end this article, is that if telling the truth about what happens in Her Majesty's prisons is a criminal offence against the Official Secrets Act, then put me down. I plead guilty. I am telling the truth. And this should not ever be a secret. The people of this country need to know what's happening. That's.
I mean, how often do you encounter these kind of spirits? Is it daily? Is it weekly, monthly, yearly? What?
All the time. Then they're always around. Yeah. I mean, I have been and done ghost busts, exorcisms, and the problem is.
So, is there any more? Is there any notable people that have come to you? Any people infamous, notorious, that people remember that you're allowed to say or not? Or
well, inmates from the next dimension. I mean, as I've mentioned before, when I was at Strangeways, I went to the area around the condemned cell where the gallows were right at the end of B Wing. And as you get there, the atmosphere changes. Well, it did when I went there, and it was absolutely cold. And I looked into the end cell. I was only in my first couple of weeks, and I saw somebody in the cell, but they didn't look quite right. And I mentioned it to the officer I was with. He said, your mind, he said, there's nobody in there. He said, all we do there is store up the old furniture. That's the condemned cell. But when I looked, there was somebody there. There's also
has anyone got any questions for John? But one of my questions, John, was, so your channel's getting a little bit more picked up. When we're finished, I'm going to put your links in the bio. So if anyone wants to follow John's channel, click on to the link in the bio and it'll take you through. Give him a sub. What's the future for your channel, John? What are you going to focus on the next couple of years? Is it going to be about prison, spirits? What's your main passion that you want to get the point across?
Well, first of all, prison doesn't work. It's an absolute insult to the people who are subjected to it. It's my opinion of imprisonment is that it's there to intimidate the working class. I mean, you've only got to look at the style of the Victorian jails. Have a look at Wormwood Scrubs or Wandsworth, Pentonville, Strangeways, Armley Jail. Great big Victorian buildings, Victorian Gothic. They're there for the working class to say, I better do what I'm told, otherwise that's where I'm going. And indeed, when the prisons were first built, that's what was happening. And today, people are being imprisoned for minor offences. When I was at Strangeways, we had people in there for stealing milk.
Really?
Yeah. Seriously. We had people in there for failing to pay their maintenance.
When
Well, they did away with the poll tax, didn't they? That's one of the reasons that we had the Strangeways riot, so that it would create a distraction from the poll tax riots that were taking place all around the country. That's one of the reasons that they had the big riot at Strangeways, so that they could focus on that, and the media would be taken away from the poll tax riots to concentrating on. That's what happened. And after that,
am I right in saying you'd left Strangeways by November 1990, when everyone was on the roof, the whole world was looking at? Were you gone then?
I'd left in November 1985. Well, let me tell you how I came to leave. Would you like to hear how I came to leave?
Yeah.
I was obviously a bit of a notorious jailer because I'd been speaking out to the press and in the papers and on the television. And I'm sure that the Home Office said, we want rid of this man, you know. And I was on duty one day in the hospital, and I was going up the stairs to the hospital ward inside the hospital unit. Up the stairs, I had a cup of coffee in my hand, and this senior officer started shouting at me, "Stand still, I want to speak to you." I said, if you want to speak to me, get me in the chief's office, put me on an official charge, and I'll deal with it. In the meantime, piss off. So, seriously. And as I walked up the stairs, he ran up behind me and grabbed hold of the tunic at the back of my neck and started to drag me backwards downstairs. Steep stairs as well, you know, about 20 of them. So I just spun round and persuaded him not to do it, you know. And he fell to the floor and rolled to the bottom of the stairs. I was subsequently suspended from duty. And I've been.
Did you ever come across your Charles Bronsons? What else was there? Fred Lowe's, David McAllister's, Robert Maudslay's. Obviously, you've been across Mad Frankie Fraser, Paul Sykes. Was there any other really well-known ones, John, that you thought, oh my God, and you know, you had to do your job?
But the ones, the real villains, they knew how to behave in prison, you know, and they just got on with it. Like the Tony Lambrianos and the Gordon Goodies and the Jim Hussey, you know, the train robbers.
Yeah.
And Lambriano was a hitman for the Craze, but he was a great cook, you know. He used to cook on D-Wing, and he was really, really capable of cooking. It was all right. You know, I didn't have any problems with him. It's the lunatic fringe that you have problems with, the ones that really want to be considered to be tough guys. There was one guy in there, notorious in his time, called George Wilkinson. I think it was 1979. And George Wilkinson must have been 6'7" and about 20 stone. He was a bloody giant. And he got into Strangeways and thought he could throw his weight around and ended up down the block. And when I saw him, he'd been refusing to eat and refusing to drink. And they said, you know, if you continue doing this, the doctors came to see him, you know, you're going to seriously damage yourself. But he couldn't handle the block because they'd given him the silent treatment, you know, so don't sell, slop out, no more word, not a word. I mean, you can imagine that permanently, nobody speaking to you. And it
obviously sent him over the edge.
It sent him over the edge, yeah. They transferred him.
So regarding your future then, John, are you going to continue to write more books? And I mean, I got a shock the other day. I didn't realize you'd written so many books. I mean, what's your future plans? Have you got more books coming?
I've got another book coming out that's going to be called, it's going to be based on my time when I came back, because the first book I wrote on the prisons, called Psychic Screw, deals with my time at the Scrubs. But the big
Wormwood Scrubs.
Yeah, the big book.
What year was that, John?
1975 to 1976, end of 76. I came back, so I was only there a short while. But I mean, the experiences I had there, I was attacked just outside the Scrubs by the children of a senior prison officer, and I ended up at Crown Court. I mean, I was put on trial at Knightsbridge Crown Court. charged with actual bodily harm. These 3 blokes attacked me, and I just put them away very quickly. And the police said, well, you didn't need to use that much violence. Really? What amount of violence is appropriate when somebody is approaching you with a glass in their hand saying they're going to kill you?
I mean, did you ever come across the Richardsons or obviously any famous people down there, infamous?
Well, they were infamous. I mean, there was the lunatic I've told you a thing about previously about the Cambridge rapist and people like that. I mean, D-Wing was the place where all the long-term villains were. And although I did work some time on D-Wing, I wasn't there permanently. The wing I worked on mainly was C-Wing. That was the biggest wing in Europe. That on one landing there was 200 inmates, one single landing. So although I did come across some names, that they were mainly. I mean, there was Commander Drury. I don't know if you've heard of him. It was the head of the. I think it was the Vice Squad at Scotland Yard, and he'd been taking money from a guy who we call the King of Soho, Bernie Silver, and Bernie Silver. I've heard of him. Yeah, Bernie Silver was in there, and Bernie Silver was in the hospital, and Commander Drury was in the segregation unit on A Wing. He was very quiet, actually, was Commander Drury. You can imagine, from being one of the commanders at Scotland Yard to being a prisoner in the scrub.
I mean, last week we spoke about the use of Lagactyl to control prisoners. The joke was Paul Sykes will have a double and a large, whatever. But do they still use them kind of tactics today with prisoners?
They can't do it anymore because when I was working in the prisons, the hospital staff were former prison officers.
Yeah.
And you were sent on a course. It took about a year, really, to get fully qualified. And then you were a hospital officer. You did all the work of a state-registered nurse, taking blood, injecting inmates with whatever you were required, dealing with the people who had diabetes, stitching up wounds, all the duties of a nursing officer. You did it. But
that Lagactyl stuff, am I right in saying that lasts about 72 hours?
The injection in your jacksie, that definitely put you out for 3 days, yeah. And when you came round, then you were on the liquid cosh, just taking it. And that's how they controlled them. That's what they did. That's what they did with Paul Sykes, anyway.
Do you think, I mean, is there known to be any kind of lasting effects from that stuff? Because it sounds extreme.
It sounds extreme. I mean, I'm not a doctor. I was following written instruction from the medical officer. On my own volition, I would not get a syringe full of Lagactyl and inject an inmate. No. I had to be told to do so by a medical officer. And then I would do it.
And of course, there's certain kind of prisoners that would like it because it makes the time go faster.
Oh, yeah. Some prisoners did really want to be on Lagactyl as much as they could get. I mean, I've never tried it myself, so I tell you, but they did seem to be completely spaced out. Yeah. You'd be surprised who really wanted it. Some of the so-called tough guys said, "Oh no, I'll have some of that."
Yeah, but I mean, regarding your channel, John, are you going to start getting? I mean, I know I spoke to Sean Atwood the other day, and I told him about you, and he went, "Jamie, get him on my." So obviously you're going to be going on Sean Atwood's, talking about a lot of your experiences that you've had. Sean will absolutely love you. You're exactly what he's after. So what's your plans then, John? Are you just going to try and make your channel really bigger, and are you just going to go down the prison route, the spirit route, or is there anything more you want to add in and show the viewers?
Well, I'm going to talk about what is happening today. I mean, on the broadcast I did today, talking about an incident in was it HM prison, Burwain, where some inmate had been scalded by water and the perpetrator got an extra 18 months. I mean, these things that's taking place today. And how is that benefiting society?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and the idea of, I did another broadcast about HMP Hull, where they're being locked up for 23 hours a day. I mean, that is no way to treat an animal. If you did that with a dog, the RSPCA would have you locked up.
Yeah.
Then you could be in there for 23 hours a day instead of the dog. Seriously. And I said this, you watch that documentary from 1980, Strange Ways, on the BBC. I actually stood up and said, I get an inaugural meeting of the Prison Force Federation, because I tried to get a proper trade union. You see, the trade union they had, still have, the Prison Officers Association, is run by management, for management. It's a tool of management. That's what controls the staff, because you've got no trade union. I started a proper trade union for non-supervisory grade staff. And when I gave the inaugural speech, I said, we cannot treat people like dogs, because if we treated animals like this, the RSPCA would have us arrested. And seriously, they would, wouldn't they?
Yeah. Do you know now, John, you're in your 70s and that. Do you ever get any shit from your past life 30 years ago, 40 years ago? People come and go, oh, I remember you, and it, you know, or is it all kind of, and it's gone now? Is it another life?
No. If anybody remembers me, they don't remember me for being abusing them, because I didn't do that. I always believed that inmates should be treated with respect, because their but for fortune is me. And that started when I ran the glass house at in the regiment when I was an officer, when I was a non-commissioned officer in Germany. And I always treated the prisoners, because they have prisoners in the prison, in the army, you know. And I always treated them with respect. And I would say, you're here for a very short period of time. You play at being a prisoner. I'll play at being a big bully NCO. And at the end of the day, we'll have a cup of tea. And that's what we did. So they had no animosity and there was no brutality. I didn't see any need in it. The people that were bullies and brutes, they were the cowards hiding behind the uniform. What good would that possibly do you? Seriously.
Yeah. John, there's a lot of nice, well, there's quite a few nice comments in there from Stephen Jones, Flying High. It's the saying you're going to follow. So listen, if you've listen to what John says, I'm going to put the link for his channel, Tales from the Jails. Give it a sub. And John, it's always a pleasure, mate. And I'm looking forward to watching you on Sean Atwood's show.
Yeah, I don't know when it's coming off. I think it's June, he said.
So see, Sean, he's got a couple of studios. He's got a Surrey studio and he's got the Liverpool studio. I'm with him this month, so I will give him a reminder. But he can't. What Sean will do, he'll film 6 or 7 in a couple of days. So you'll be on his next block for Liverpool. So I kind of recommended you the day. I said, because I thought he must have already known who you are, because you've got the real porridge guy.
I haven't seen.
Sean's had him on a couple of times, and when I sent him our interview the other day, he said, "Let's get him on ours." So Sean will kind of talk to you, and you can go right the way through with all the Paul Sykes stuff, Mad Frankie Fraser. You know, I know if you sit with Sean rather than on this, if you sit with him in the studio, Sean will get a lot out of you for hours, and you know, a lot of people want to hear that. Plus, it'll only benefit your channel, John.
I hope it will. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for inviting me, and
so, always a pleasure, John. Keep in touch, buddy, and God bless, and thank you to everyone for watching. Please like and subscribe. God bless. Cheers, John.
Thank you.